Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Justin Machibaya, the Managing Director of Homelux Real Estate. Enjoy this informative conversation. Justin Machibaya, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor. Thank you for setting aside time for us to have this conversation.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I consider you a property mogul. You have 26 years experience in the real estate business. And 20 years of that you've spent building your company that you started, Homelux Real Estate Company. But I want us to go back to where you were born, where you went to school, so that we find out what it is that goes into making a property mogul. Could you take us back to where you were born and how you grew up?
Thanks, Trevor. I'm not quite sure whether that would really build into the property position now. Yeah. But yeah, I was born in Bikita, 1969, and my father was a former BSAP. So when he got out of the service, he then decided to look for a farm. And I was 3 years old then. So the history says. And they bought a farm in Chivu, Wiltshire, and they moved on to a completely open piece of land, no improvements, nothing. And they started building up his farm from there. So 3 years in Bikita, then the rest of my life in Chivu, Wiltshire. So raised by peasant farmers, very, very hardworking. Everything that we ate, we produced off the farm, and sustenance entirely came from the farm. Yeah.
And then you went to the University of Zimbabwe to do Bachelor of Business Studies.
Yes, I did my primary school in Chivu. I was not one of the privileged ones to go straight into boarding or into high schools, as one would say. I went to an upper top, Form 1 to Form 3 in Chivu. That was walking some 10 kilometers in the morning, 10 kilometers coming back. And when you get back, you sit down and do your meal and then get in to assist the parents working in the fields and taking care of cattle. And then Form 4, that's when I then moved to Gweru for my O-level. And yeah, I got the shock of my life because in the upper top, I used to be in the top 3. And when I went to this Nashville High School O-level, the first composition that I got, I remember that very distinctly well. I actually got 7 out of 20, and it was all red. And the teacher was Mrs. Elwanga. And she said to me, can I talk to you? And I reached out to you and said, yes, this is where I'm coming from. I was in the top group. This comes as a shock, and can you help me? And she then asked if she could get other teachers to come by. And yeah, then O-level was executed very well. Proceeded to Thornhill High School for my A-level. Then proceeded to our University of Zimbabwe to do my Bachelor of Business Studies honors degree.
The 10 kilometers to school, 10 kilometers back.
Yeah.
You get home, you have a meal, and off you work. That's a tough disciplinarian upbringing, that which we don't do to our kids anymore.
Very correct. And you can imagine Dad being a former BSAP. Discipline was his culture. So what he said should be done would be done.
No debate.
No debate. He allowed an appeal, but there had to be a correct way of appealing. So in terms of discipline and the culture of working,
yeah,
working is just natural to me. I don't even think about it. I don't make an effort about it. I actually feel not quite complete if I don't work. So when you look at the generation today, yes, there's a gap. There's definitely a gap because the scenarios that being in real estate that we sometimes find in a lot of people's homes is the kid is sitting on the sofa, they are served by the maid, their meal is served, and plates are taken off. And
What's your view of that?
I think it destroys the next generation. I believe God believes in people working, because when he created Adam, before he even attached the woman to him, he gave him the Garden of Eden to take care of. And he said, work.
And we're crippling our kids.
We are crippling our kids. And I think any generation that do not know how to work and why working is important is almost lost before they've even started. Hence, sometimes even when it comes to application of financial resources and any kind of resource, including talent, I think I see it treated commonly, generally, as opposed to really being treated with reverence for the benefit of individual and benefit of society. Yeah.
So clearly, a strong hand coming from dad. And what about mom? What did mom pass on to you?
Mom passed on the spirit of praying. Yeah.
Dad was tough. You then got onto your knees with the help of mom.
Yes, I think the structure that I got was dad gave the law. Mom administered the law.
Right.
And in administering the law, she would appeal to everyone and say, look, guys, let's do what dad is saying. And above all, let's pray. So the spirit of the fear of the Lord, yeah, I got it at a very young age. And I kept believing, because I thought I qualified to go to boarding, but the parents didn't have the money to send me into boarding. And going to boarding, it was just like, okay, a Sekuru who was working just passed by one evening and said, I want to take this Msukuru and take him to school and try and see whether I can get a place in Gweru. And that was a great divine intervention in the answer to prayer. Yeah.
And I get it. I get the sense that God and faith plays a hugely important role in your life. Do you want to talk to me about that?
Yes. Two things, Trevor. I believe that the anointing is in the doing. That unless you step out to do, you cannot expect the anointing of God to rest upon your life. And you can't meet faith while you are seated. You can't meet faith while you are on your knees praying. You must pray, but you must arise and do work. And faith manifests in working, in doing. But right now, we have a bit of a crisis, in particular our spiritual faith and doctrine teaching, to a point where it's like you pray, things happen for you. There are miracles that people wait on and seek, but unless we realize that even in the times of Jesus Christ, the miracles were not the norm. Working was the norm. Miracles were not as normal as they would seem.
You just wanted to focus on the very important point that you raised, which is faith without works
Is dead.
is dead.
Yeah.
And works without faith also amounts to nothing.
There's nothing.
And I like the fact that you're saying prayer is important, but you got to go out. That's when faith manifests itself, when you're actually doing the work.
Yes, there's a man of God who said very recently, maybe not very recently, but he said, prayer's part is to lead to revelation.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think there are quite a number of verses in the Bible that speak about the secret thing belonging to the Lord our God. Like Deuteronomy 29, verse 29, it says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but that which he revealeth to us belong to us and our children, that will fulfill the covenant. Psalm 25, 14, if I'm not mistaken, says, the Lord confides in those who fear him. Meaning, there's a relationship. So we need to seek prayer, seeking the will of God, the revelation, the secret things. But what do you do when you receive them? You must then be a good steward of whatever you have received. Go out and implement it and allow it to manifest to the glory of the kingdom. my pastor generally has this consistent saying that any human being is about building people, building dreams, reforming and transforming. And how do you reform and transform other than by the revelation that you receive for the people, for the kingdom, and not for ourselves? And if we prioritize ourselves, we miss the mark.
And you're building people, you're building families through your pursuit, your passion in property. But I wanted to get us to, so you graduate from the University of Zimbabwe with a Bachelor of Business Studies. You then decide also to do a diploma in sales and marketing.
Yeah. I actually didn't quite decide, because when I was at university, Trevor, my dream was just one. I considered myself a marketer, and my dream organization was to work for Air Zimbabwe.
Aha.
Yeah. And for sure, I did get an opportunity to go in for an interview at Air Zimbabwe. But I didn't get the job, neither did they get back to me. So I waited and waited until frustration came in. And by the time I realized that this thing is not going to happen, everybody almost was employed. And I actually couldn't find a job.
And you're still waiting for
And I was still waiting. And I actually got stranded to a point where I ended up looking for a job in teaching. And I actually got a teaching post in Mutare. Went to Mutare, and I was sent right down to Gideon Muhlang and Chipinge. And I taught there for 4 months. I actually didn't know about real estate. Honestly speaking, I didn't know. Then it then just happened that my wife, who's my wife now, who was then my girlfriend, his father played golf with a man who ran a real estate firm, and he was seeking for someone to train as a registered agent. And they happened to then have a discussion over dinner. My father-in-law now then talking to his son, who had done more or less a similar program with me, to undergo that training through this guy. And my girlfriend's brother turned that down. And my girlfriend asked if she could recommend someone to Roger Senior. And she recommended me. And that's how I actually got exposed to real estate. Before that, I didn't know. But when I got into it, I loved it. I loved working with people. I enjoy working with people. I like seeing...
That's a fascinating entry into what eventually becomes your passion, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's God's hand right there. Is that your sense?
Absolutely.
Talk to me about that.
Look, the coincidence of it would not be coincidence in my view. There are too many things that were just put together and tied up together very nicely. And when she recommended me, and I called the gentleman, he actually did not call me for an interview, but he told me to come for work. So I came and immediately started. I didn't even have a driver's license. I actually had to take a driver's license under his training. And he trained me very well for 7 solid years. That's then when I did the selling and sales diploma, and then proceeded to do a diploma in real estate locally, and then proceeded to do a master's in real estate in South Africa.
I just want to dwell on that briefly, because as a man of faith, and we know that a lot of people wait on miracles, but we also know that God speaks to us through other human beings. And in this instance, you have your girlfriend, who's now your wife, and your father-in-law, all being used. Am I right in interpreting it that way? Is that how you take it too?
That's how I take it. That's definitely how I take it. And as a result of that kind of like perspective, I've taken that the real estate is our field. Our route is in real estate.
And then your first job is with as a sales manager at Alexander Court Estates. Am I right? Or
that's correct. I started as just a property sales negotiator, and my first part was actually confined to high density properties only. But I excelled so well in
So you started at the bottom.
No, I started at the bottom. I did the properties for 2 years, but I excelled very well. I think on average I would sell about 15 properties a month. So made quite a lot of money in commissions. Although my commission percentage was still very small, because I think I was on 10%, when the industry was generally on about 45-50% for the same position. But Roger Senior, who then became my very serious mentor, kept on saying, let me train you properly. Let me put the foundations correct. A time will come when you end at that level. And for sure,
you were there for 7 years, so you were really given the training that you required to be an expert in this industry.
yes. And I can actually say, on behalf of that man, I think I'm probably one of the few with the kind of exposure that I have in the industry, and I give credit to him. Yeah.
And then you went to become, you were appointed managing director of Highrise Real Estate. You were there for 2 years, 1997 to 1999, with the experience that Roger Senior had given you. Talk to me about that time.
Yeah, I got to a point where we had this proposed structure in Alexander Court that was going to make me a director after certain levels of qualifications. But it was a family business that then took a certain direction. And when it then got to the 7 years, I then decided to step out and start a business. And I started Highrise with a colleague. And we did very well in the 2 years. And then I decided to step out and then start Homelux.
On your own?
On my own.
Why? Talk to me about why you decided to step out. What was the motivation? What was the inspiration of saying, you know, I'm in a partnership with somebody, I'm going to go and start my own thing called Homelux 20 years ago?
Yeah, the Highrise initially in itself was just an estate agent's business. Property sales, property rentals, valuations, and advisory here and there. I'd then done my master's, and I'd been exposed then to property development. And because my major was in property development. And I really wanted to pursue property development. So I left to pursue amongst the agent's side to aid the property development onto it. I think the master's degree that I'd done exposed me so much that I realized that what we were pursuing and how we were pursuing it would not fulfill what I was feeling in my spirit. Hence I left and started Homelux with my wife.
How easy was it to start Homelux? I'm looking at funding, I'm looking at the market gap that you spotted, particularly the funding side. Talk to me about that.
It wasn't easy, but then certainly the economy was more stable. We started Highrise, for example, with $50,000 then. That was 1997. I started Homelux without much, because I remember the initial offices that we actually had were 2 offices in town. You know those chairs of Morara that you buy on the side of the road? Yeah, that's how we started. And I remember a client coming in to pay money, and he says, I don't think I'm happy to pay, because I may come back from the bank and not find you here. That became a challenge for me. And I said to my wife, look, at the end of the day, whatever we are making, let's put it back. So my wife would manage the property management side. I would run with the sales and the valuation side. The support that we got from the market was definitely amazing. In 6 months, we had actually managed to redo our offices, and we built up then slowly from there. In terms of borrowings, it was difficult, though mortgages and funding were available, but they would always want properties to securitize, which we didn't have. Yeah.
And now Homelux has grown to be a big player in the industry with property development side, valuation advisory services, property management and property sales. How many people are you employing? How big is the operation now?
The head office has got about 37 people. Sites, staff range from probably between about 150 to 300, depending on the number of projects that we're undertaking. Like right now, we have just started on quite a number of projects. So we could probably be 350, 400 on various sites. Yeah.
What's the mainstay of the business?
The mainstay is property development, which I really like very much because of the impact and influence that it does. There was a time that I actually used to think that our product was properties. Until somewhere along the line, I got a revelation that the product is actually not properties, it's families. It's people. And that changed quite a significant dimension. And I believe the Lord wanted us to see and have that kind of an insight, because from that point, I can actually check and record that there was a tremendous increase in business opportunities, in the way we execute. On the property development side, one of the major things, initially we would buy properties to develop, but now we really don't. We have lots and lots of people bringing in their properties, old people who don't have any income, but with strategic properties, they come, we partner, and they get units out of the developments. And I find families being very happy, children preparing to write wills and preparing to rest well and leaving inheritance for their children and children's children. That is a great blessing. Yeah.
Expand that for us, or unpack it more. So you thought that your business was in property development, but you're saying the revelation has come to you that your business is actually building families. Break that down for us so that we understand it.
Okay. What I mean, Trevor, is property is a product, but a product is for people. So if we focus on the product, we may probably end up having the mentality that whatever we build, whatever we develop, people will buy. But if you focus on people, we are trying to figure out then what is it that they need. How can we develop properties that meet people that are just finishing from university, people that are preparing to get married or they've just gotten married, and people that are preparing to retire, for example. Like right now, I'm very preoccupied with the development of retirement estates as a way of giving back to those that have built the nation that we are in today. We are driving on their roads. We are using infrastructure that their labor has gone into. But at the same time, they're very little to show. They are actually struggling because the pension that they have do not work. Security is compromised. So because of the focus on people and on families, development of the property products has become great fun, and great fun for sure. And the team loves it.
And you've taken that thinking into the people that you work with, where you are inculcating this concept of building families using property. Talk to me about that.
The whole team understands that, or at least we are trying to get the whole team to understand that it's about people. And God is about people. To the extent that we respect and honor his people is to the extent that God would actually defend our territory for his people. So when we develop a product, we actually go into the market and try and get a sensitivity to say, what is it that you'd want? Why would you want it like this? Where would you want it? And what sort of pricing works? So you find out that most of our projects that we actually do, they are priced well, to a point that other developers actually ask us and say, hey, you are messing up the market because the prices are low. But I'm saying we are saving people, and people who are limited in resources in a difficult environment, and how can we make a contribution? So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's not a question of level. The way we would like to treat a person who's buying for the first time is the way that would like to treat a person who's coming in with $1 million to buy. And we are saying the objective is the same. Levels may be different. Yeah.
Still talking about families, we did talk in the beginning about how we're crippling our kids.
Yeah.
You have a very interesting approach with your children, where you got them to be part of the business. Walk us through that conversation that you had with your kids and finally persuade them to work with you.
Thanks, Trevor. That conversation actually started at the point where they were A-level. And we were then discussing the kind of degrees and programs that they wanted to do. As a person, personally, my view is God gives you a field, God gives you a route. Pastor Tom teaches that very well, that God gives you a route and protects the route. And I've kind of like the Jewish culture of doing business. If they are farmers, they are farmers. If they are tailors, they are tailors. If they are fishers, they are fishers. If they are doctors, they are doctors. It's passed on from one generation to the other. The reason being, the skill is retained and the skill is developed. Therefore, as the development of the skill continues, greater revelation comes. So I say to my guys, look, this is what we have, and this is what has sent you guys to school so far. But somewhere along the line, you would need to take over this thing, and you need your investment in this thing.
You need to take over Homelux at some point.
Yes, because you are the owners of it. Now, how do you do that if you are of a completely different orientation? I'm not objecting or I'm not opposed to a different orientation in terms of what you pursue, but at least in the route of my children, I must have one or two that I can comfortably say they understand the business and they will protect the route. So we had to discuss, and they ended up picking up degree program that had to do with real estate and property. So the first child did interior architecture and is an architect of note. Now he's working in the business, and all finishes and details of what we produce sits on his desk. The second one did graphic design and communication, and so that they would have a focus on how to pay attention on the communication of Homelux issues and matters and products to the market, but also heavily involved in the day-to-day actual operation of the execution of products. And all my management team, our approach is exactly the same. That their children, because they have sold so much into Homelux, their children should get into Homelux. They should get into real estate.
So this is positive nepotism.
I don't know, it's positive nepotism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's working for you.
It's working. It's working to the point where I'm actually now starting to draw back and allowing these structures in Homelux to take over, still guiding the children in the path that they need to go. And I'm looking forward to the children of my management coming in and also getting their training in the organization. And I actually did not think that they would stay. But now they don't even talk about it. They actually talk to me about where is the next project and how can we execute the next project, and can we make sure that the next project is the better project.
That's fascinating.
When COVID came, Trevor, for example, being old school, because I'm the oldest in the organization, I've always believed in the office and people reporting for work and whatever, but my son has had to say, Dad, prior to COVID, it's not important for me to be in the office at 8 o'clock. As long as deliverables are on your desk, on your machine, by the time that the management team requires it, it's okay. Because there are times that I start working at 11 o'clock to 4 a.m. because I don't want the interruption. COVID came, I'm saying, oh, okay, I see. This is what this generation was saying. So interest in the office, our whole perspective, my perspective has changed.
Because of listening to the new generation.
Yeah.
You're passionate about young people investing in property. And I listened to you saying, God created land once, and he will not recreate it again, which is a truth.
Yeah.
And you're passionate about saying to young people, start early, start young. Talk to me about the importance of young people investing in property and your advice to them in terms of how they ought to go about it.
No, good point, Trevor. Yes, God created land once. Man is trying to make an effort by reclaiming, filling parts of the ocean to create land. And that in itself is actually an indicator of how precious land is. Now, because the population of the world is increasing daily, okay, just to take as an example, if the world population today is like 7 billion people, and you have X amount of square meters over the whole world, take the number, the total square meters divided by the 7 billion, you get a rate per square meter. If you then take 8 billion, that rate keeps going up. So that's why real estate in itself becomes an asset of note. And any serious investor, business person should have a solid real estate investment. Now, real estate investment by its nature is capital intensive, so it takes time. So the earlier you get into the game, guess what? The better. And you can also start, generally my position is start young, okay? If you can start by yourself, start. If you can't start by yourself, please try and build a grouping of like-minded people and pull your resources together and start. Now, start small. You know, the hyperinflationary environment especially has messed up people in our country. When I started real estate, I understood that you would start off in the high density, Budiriro, Highfield, Glenview, you graduate to Warren Park D, you cross into Maybelline, Mount Pleasant, maybe Borodale. But the hyperinflation has created the situations and scenarios where a lot of people jumped from zero to Borodale. 100% okay, as long as you have the diligence and the ability to sustain it. But Pastor Tom always says it's easy to obtain, a lot more difficult to maintain. Hence, when things get difficult, the properties are neglected, they are not maintained, people don't even know when to sell because there's pride of Borodale, and yet the situation on the ground is telling you, hey, my brother, my sister, you family, adjust as quickly as possible. So start small.
The start small, I'll hold you there because you've just said something which I think is important. Because the 0 to Borodale means you've skipped some stages. The 10 kilometers of you walking to school and coming back and all that you did to be who you are right now, 0 to Borodale means you've skipped quite a lot of the discipline that is required for you to sustain and maintain, isn't it?
Yes. I think there's one of the writers who talked about doing your 10,000 hours to be proficient in whatever you're doing. So if you just jump and you have not allowed yourself to build your 10,000 hours as you are going to a point where it almost becomes natural to do whatever you are doing, there's definitely a problem.
So you're saying start early, start soon. Let's develop that thought.
Yeah, start early, start small. Small is basically high density, for example. I gave this challenge to my sons and their friends. And I said, hey guys, we have developed Teen World, development in Teen World. I'll come in, let's form up a consortium. I'll come in with a stand valued 20,000. You 4 guys come up with money to build, so that we build, we sell, and we move on to the next one. And I'll just give you this very quickly.
Sure.
So I put in my 20,000 in the land, and I told them I'm not going to put in any money. Because if I would not do that, the moment they think it's getting tough, they'll gravitate toward the easiest way. Dad, we are short of money, can you please put in a little bit more? And I said, no, I'm just putting in land, but this project, let's agree. How long do you think it will take if you make sacrifices and whatever? It will take 4 months. Let's do it. But you are the ones who are going to build this property. Let's look at the plan, come up with the plan. They did. And the 4 of them started off, if I recall well, I think they started off with about 6 grand each. Okay, so 6 times 4, that's 24. That's what they started building up with. They rushed, built up the structure. They came and told me that they are a bit stuck. And I said, no, let's see. What are you doing? You can't tell me you are stuck and you are pursuing a project, and yet you are almost going out to eat sushi regularly.
Yeah.
You are eating outside regularly, meaning you are eating your door frame, you are eating your window frame. You go out and you spend $40. That's exactly 2 door frames or 4 locks. And yet you have got an assignment that needs to be done. And we had to have a conversation. You can't progress without making the relevant sacrifices at the relevant time and season. Because everything is seasonal. You miss an opportunity, you miss it. But you are driving cars, guys. And these are personal cars. And you've got an assignment that you need to complete so that you multiply yourself as fast as you can. Right now, you can wake up to 10 p.m. I can't do that. And I don't want to do that. Because I've plowed and did my 10,000 hours a couple of times. It's for you guys to do it. And for sure, they had to make the necessary changes. Didn't they finish the house? They finished.
You didn't chip in beyond the 20,000?
No. My position was very clear. If you don't finish, it's okay.
I'll sell the land.
No, it can stay for another year. It doesn't affect my position. It does affect your position. And I then sold the property for them. Okay. Earned the profit and recovered the capital. Moved on to the next one. And the model that I had given them is, if you do this consistently, by the time the 7th or 8th unit is done, each one of you should be able to have a house. And you have it at the medium high density area. Start there. And put a tenant. You don't necessarily have to stay in it, which is one of the key things that I find, particularly with, if I may use this term maybe for lack of a better term, the kind of Salala generation, they believe that they can never stay in the high density. So you are sent to university, you complete university, you are earning whatever you are earning, and you're spending $500 a month in rental. Okay. Do you realize that you can actually lease for the rest of your life? But you are making money for somebody else. So why not make the sacrifices now?
So it's about discipline.
Yeah.
Sacrifice,
yeah,
being patient,
and focus,
and being humble to start in Zivarasekwa instead of wanting to be in Borodo.
Yes, but one of the most significant business people in town, at some point he actually had about 90 high density houses. Then rentals were about 400. Just do your calculation. So versus someone who probably has 1 or 2 houses in Borodo, because it then becomes a question of return. Then that $400 was actually like 30%, 25% return, which was extremely high. Again, it was for a season. But now high density rentals have gone down because there's been quite a number of lands that have been made available, and people have bought their small stands and they put up their cabin and they move on to their property instead of continuing renting. So you may find this very interesting, Trevor. People in the high density, from my observation, they are some of the people that are at great peace. Because whatever they have, they own it, they don't owe, and they live straightforward, basic lives. When you cross over the other side, you may find all kinds of vehicles parked, but there is no joy. Because probably data structures are everywhere, people are losing properties, and you say to yourself, but Sell the cars, man, and settle what you need to settle. But the image becomes an issue. So you'd really need one. I think each person needs to take stock and say, where am I at? Where do I need to go? So if you probably ask a young person, middle-aged person, older person, and say, just talk to me about your 5-year plan, and as far as your investments are concerned. 10-year plan, 10-year plan. 2 years, you don't get nothing. Which means we have developed a consumptive mind, and we are led by consumptive expenditure patterns as opposed to investment patterns.
What about the young people that will push back and say, but Justin and Trevor, their generation had mortgages. We don't have access to mortgages. So you can afford the luxury to talk like you're doing because you had it good.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point because definitely mortgages did help. Because I remember that my first property that I bought was in Avonlea. It was 390,000. My employer who trained me, Roger Senior, actually assisted me get a 100% caps mortgage. But I could not afford to stay in the house. So we had to put in a tenant.
You couldn't afford to pay the mortgage.
We couldn't afford to service the whole mortgage, the repayment. The rental that we got from the tenant was actually not enough to meet the entire mortgage repayment. And we had to supplement and at the same time paying rent where we were in the apartment that we were staying in. But that sacrifice was necessary. I can bet you, Trevor, right now, today, those that know how to bring themselves together, young people, middle-aged people, older people, professionals, we have a group of professionals that I work with. And when an opportunity comes, we know who to call upon. And resources are mobilized very quickly. And a project is executed specifically for that consortium. And I've definitely seen that to work very well and meaningfully so.
Let's go to the issue, the impact of land reform in terms of taking away the ability of a lot of people to use land as collateral. And the fact that the nationalization of land basically means that most of our land is not securitable. What has that done to your sector, to the property market?
Yeah, no, that definitely, Trevor, has had a significant impact. Maybe let me just start off by maybe giving a brief explanation that real estate plays a very significant contribution to GDP, GDP of any nation. In South Africa, for example, in 2014, real estate and its related industries contributed 22%. In 2018, in the entirety of USA, real estate contributed 6.8%. And globally, real estate contribution to the nations of wealth, to the wealth of nations globally, was just over 1.06 trillion United States dollars. Okay, now, so it's an integral part in any national development program, because securitization of real estate assets allow a lot of financial instruments and trading of financial instruments in the market. There are the mortgages that we are talking about. There are renovations that we are talking about. There are mortgaging your properties for other things, to fund businesses, new businesses, fund existing businesses, mortgaging to buy equipment. And our farmers had that backbone. And hence certain financial institutions were actually set up and ran on the basis of that. And certain urban areas, towns and cities were actually sustained by farming activities. What we probably may not realize is, if you trace back, the activity that was happening was because there was this securitization aspect, which is no longer there.
There was an asset which
There
has
was
been
an
taken
asset.
away.
Yes. So if you were to do a balance sheet check to say what was the balance sheet position of our, say, agricultural real estate assets then, and what is our agricultural real estate asset now, you'll find that as a nation we have lost quite a significant one. So I think it's imperative for us as a nation to try and figure out what can we really do to ensure that we create a land that can be securitized.
Do you have any ideas on that, Justin? The way forward?
I think, in my view, yeah, the land redistribution exercise was necessary and it had to be done. But I think it must come to an absolute defined end where whoever is on land should never have a thought or imagination that something could happen. So if you hear today that there's a farm invasion, what is its effect on any other farmer? It doesn't matter which race or which tribe. It's like you are now investing with a cautious mind that says, you know what, let me just use the land for production, but not treat the land as your home. And say, you know what, I'm a farmer, and this is where I'm best, and I'm going to use this to do everything. So I think that part is critical. And our narrative, I think we can do a bit more to our narrative. We have done a great exercise in terms of the redistribution. I think in terms of its effect and impact, I think let's get ourselves to serious production. Otherwise, we make ourselves look quite funny. Here locally as well as internationally. It's like, so what were you trying to do and why did you do it if the land is lying fallow?
So do you think that the 99-year leases are bankable? Is the industry comfortable with the 99-year leases?
I think
give you the confidence?
99-year lease, Trevor, is standard.
Okay.
Zambia literally runs on a 99-year lease. Mozambique runs on a 99-year lease. I mean, most of the developed countries runs on a 99-year lease. It's not the 99-year lease that's the problem. It's the credibility of it. And I think that's what we need to work on.
Yeah. The confidence, the
trust.
trust.
Confidence, the trust, yeah. Correct. If I feel at peace that I can go on a piece of land and develop and spend $1 million, I'll definitely do that.
But not that you don't have that sense right now.
I don't think there's that sense right now. And I think our financial institutions are most likely struggling because what recourse do I have if I give a brother money against a 99-year lease and he fails to pay? How do I protect my interest? How do I register my interest? That kind of a situation. Yeah.
There's also, you've made me aware of the problems that afflict your sector, which I was not aware of. The shortages of plumbers, of builders, and painters. How bad is this shortage, Justin?
Yeah, no, the shortage is real of artisans. We call those artisans in the industry. In the sense that we have had technical colleges in the past that would actually develop these skills consistently. And the technical colleges have not been operating at capacity. There was actually a shift also in the mindsets of people to move more toward degrees.
Academic.
Exactly, academic people, hence the number of universities that we have. But when you look at the number of universities that we have and the number of students that we are actually releasing annually and keeping in relation to the practical kind of work, there's a huge gap. So what has then happened is the artisans that we have right now, the old ones trained with class 1, class 2, there are very few. Such that if the economy were to turn around today and we have a massive construction boom, and you say a site must have 5,000 people, and you've got 10 sites like that, we don't have the artisans.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you, it's proceed.
Yeah, and we see it because we insist on using artisans with qualifications. And we are finding a lot of guys coming in and saying, Lord, I've worked in construction, but I don't have a certificate. But how do I know?
And yet we used to have a pool of those, Justin.
We were actually exporting, Trevor.
Yeah.
The region would actually get from us.
But we don't have this anymore.
We don't have this anymore. So in my view, there's real need to actually recapacitate that site. But can I tell you what? Right now, a builder, most of them actually are self-employed because they are well sought after. The same thing with electricians, the same thing with carpenters, the same thing with plumbers, the same thing with tilers. Why? Because they're in high demand.
So how do we resolve that talent deficit that we have?
I would say two things, Trevor. Let's recapacitate and relook at our training approaches. Let's encourage people to go back to the technical colleges and get proper training. Apprenticeships, correct. And let's probably look at possibilities of doing building brigades for those that are in the industry. Like, for example, we have actually made this kind of a proposal to saying, guys, we have 5 or 6 or 7 projects that we are working on right now. So can we be allowed on that particular site that we come up with a training program that is undertaken on that site with the necessary Ministry of Manpower Development and whatever, checking and setting the criteria and doing all the necessary inspections. And the people are then trained on the job, led by those that are experienced. I think we can do that for the young graduates that are coming out of university. My submission is don't waste the time holding on to your degree program. Get your hands dirty into something practical.
Get a skill.
And earn. Yeah, and make yourself demanded. We can do that with prison ministry. Prisoners, those in prisons, can actually save part of their time getting that kind of training so that by the time they get out of the prison, they actually have a skill, as opposed to them just getting released and not knowing where to start from. We can do that with any other person, those that don't do very well in school. Because our education system is like, if you don't have 5 O levels, you are done. But tell me, show me in the Bible where it says, without education, you are done. But without skill, you are done.
Yeah.
But the Bible consistently talks about
talent.
A skilled man shall serve before kings.
Wow. Are you getting traction in terms of proffering those ideas to the authorities?
Yes, Donald, our current minister of our ministry, of our industry, very, very positive, and he likes the idea, and we are working on that. I think very soon we should actually have that. Honorable Garwe.
Okay. Let's hope something comes out of that. It also brought my attention to the fact that we actually have a dire shortage of building materials. Your cement aggregates, your concrete mix. I mean, if you're not in the industry, you're not aware that we do have these problems that are holding back the completion of projects. Talk to me about that and the impact it is having on the industry.
A very great negative impact in the sense that it actually affects the delivery period of projects. And it's leading to stoppages, start, stop. And it's a problem. Like right now, cement is in short supply. We have projects right now where work is actually not taking place because the suppliers of premix concrete, they don't have the ability to supply. And I understand and I feel for them. You can't, it's a situation where you can't even say, I'm invoking penalties because you failed to deliver, because it's completely beyond their control. So we are building the Bridge Highway. A lot of cement is going in, a lot of concrete and 3/4 stones are going in, and that suffocates other arms of other lines of property development projects. And we can't afford that. Again, you go back to a point where if the economy were to open, Trevor, we don't have capacity. If you get into a hardware, you can actually have to go through 3 or 4 hardwares to look for a piece of item before you actually can find it. It's rare to actually go into one hardware and do a single purchase. And sometimes for as little as $1,000.
You have to hunt around.
You have to hunt around. So if it's like in our case where our expenditure is very high, you can then imagine the kind of drama that we go through in putting our materials together.
So all this must be suffocating the development of the sector, and indeed all other related issues around jobs and that kind of issue, those kind of issues.
Yes, definitely, I would say yes.
Have you proffered any suggestion? Do you have any ideas in terms of how we could overcome these bottlenecks?
We have made some submissions, sure. But I think core to me is because of the contribution of real estate to the GDP. I think it would be good to come up with certain incentives that could enable particularly manufacturing of certain core building materials that we are importing.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think if certain economic zones were to really be established, that if you are based in maybe Rua or a certain industrial area and you are producing this X amount, you are exempt from this kind of tax, provided your output meets a certain minimum threshold,
right,
for example, because we want capacity. And what we then have to import where we don't have a choice, maybe to also look and say, what can we do onto the duties payable on those kind of materials, so that the tax department, instead of collecting at the border, because it's going in, sales go through, there's VAT.
Yeah.
It's creating employment, there's payee. Businesses are doing well, there's income tax. So to kind of like see where you can best harvest in a manner that then allows business to thrive to the benefit of the nation. Yeah.
Let me take you to something which is slightly controversial, that is rogue players in the property market. We've had a number of reports of people being cheated of their hard savings. You say people should start small and stuff. Somebody comes in and says, I've got a property. You put your money in there, and the next thing they disappear.
Yeah.
What is the industry doing to address this situation?
Yeah, no, that one, Trevor, is a very sad one. But unfortunately, it's quite rampant, and people are losing money, especially those in the diaspora. Yeah, because they tend then to use relatives here who don't have exposure, and they can be shown a title deed, they can't quite tell whether it's true or not. As an industry, I sat as a board member of the Estate Agents Council for quite a while, as at some point elected by the estate agents themselves, and at some point as a government appointee. You see, the Estate Agents Council is governed by an act, but that act is specific to its members only.
I see.
Yeah. So if one of our members acts in an untoward manner relating to handling trust funds and people's money, then definitely we then come in. Those that are outside, as in the bogus firms, there's not much that the Estate Agents Council can do other than to consistently create awareness. And I think the Estate Agents Council for a while has been doing that to a point where they've actually employed a compliance officer to also check on some of the companies that then advertise. If they are not an estate agent, we make reports to the police. Once we make a report to the police, it's up to the police to pursue. Yeah, but that one is a sad matter.
What advice do you have to the members of the public who fall victim to that? What advice do you have to most 60% of our viewers are in the diaspora? What advice do you have for them? They want to invest in property, they haven't done the proper checks and so forth. What advice would you give to
No, thanks, Trevor. The advice that I would give is definitely that please deal with a registered agent. And to check that, one is to phone the Estate Agents Council. Is this company registered? Who is the principal registered agent? And are they paid up in subscriptions? If they are part of the Estate Agents Council, definitely deal with them. If they are not, I would say flee. Yeah. But part of the exposure is that there are also a lot of developers in courts. They say we have a piece of land and we are now selling properties or stands. Again, I think I would advise people to actually deal with through their lawyers.
Are the developers, are they part of your real estate industry, or they sit somewhere?
Developers,
vaguely,
they are not part of the Real Estate Institute or Estate Agents Council. And unfortunately, there's a proposed developers bill, but it hasn't been passed yet. So there's nothing governing the conduct of property developers.
Wow.
And that puts people at great exposure. Yeah.
So what advice would you give then for people being approached by property developers? What should they do to ensure that they don't lose their hard-earned money?
If you are dealing directly with the developer, I think on any development there are certain documents to ask for. Always ask for the copy of the title deed. Ask for a copy of the permit. And check that the conditions, first and foremost, that the permit is valid and that the conditions in the permit have been met, which have to do mainly with the endowment payment and the infrastructure development, which is the roads and stormwater drainage and sewerage reticulation if there is sewer, and water reticulation. Because you will need that compliance in place to be able to secure your title deed, without which there are lots and lots of developments that have been undertaken and people don't have title. Again, it goes back to the securitization issues that we are talking about. That money has been spent out and it's logged in an asset that's not performing, if I may use that term. Yeah.
You spoke about Mr. Senior, what's his first name?
Roger Senior.
Roger Senior was your mentor. I know you believe in having mentors.
Big time.
Talk to me about the mentors that you have right now and what benefits you get from people having a mentor and your own role in mentoring other people.
No, thanks, Trevor. I believe so much in mentoring. Something that I caught later on, because working with a mentor defends you from walking certain paths that they've walked through. So it shortens your paths in many ways. And two, you're actually getting revelation and insight that you're actually not paying for.
Wow.
That otherwise you would actually go into school to pay for. And that normally comes in the wisdom that they have that you can't get in any academic book. So it's the direction, the counsel, the will to go and seek and say, look, how do you see? What do you think? And what's your insight? So, because I believe in the wheel of life, that I'm spirit, soul, and body, and I need mentors that cover. I've got a mentor spiritually, a couple of mentors. I've got mentors for family. I've got mentors for health. I've got mentors for friendships. I've got financial mentors.
Wow.
Yeah, and it makes a massive difference. Not easy to access them because they are busy and they are productive.
But you would encourage young people to have mentors?
Definitely. And I would probably say to young people, it's good to actually read on mentorship even before you actually start approaching someone and say, can you please mentor me? There is one very good book written by a Dr. Tawafazo Makoni entitled Nurturing Champions. It's basically about mentoring. I would urge young people to actually pick that kind of a book, read. I believe in mentoring young people. At the end of the day now, with where I am, I have 10 of age, man.
You don't look like it.
The moment you hit 50 plus,
right,
it's a different game.
Half time is done.
Yeah, half time is done. And I'm very clear. I'm actually more conscious of the other half left than the first half played. I can only try and do the best that I can to download. And it's a joy. to actually work with young people.
You've already moved us into our book section. You love reading, like you've already indicated. Do you mind sharing with our viewers who love reading the books that you've read that you want to recommend to them?
Yes, I read a lot, Trevor. Normally at any given point I have 4 or 5 books that I'm reading. And I'm no longer under pressure to read to finish. I'm actually reading slowly to assimilate. I like John Maxwell. I like...
Any particular John Maxwell?
In terms of books,
Yeah.
I would say anything that talks of leadership and management.
Right.
Yeah.
From John Maxwell.
From John Maxwell, yeah. There is Malcolm Gladwell. He writes very, You Are the Outlier. It really helped me. I can't remember, I think I've read about 3 or 4 of his books, but very insightful in terms of thinking. Right now I'm reading a book entitled Boundaries. It's one of the finest books, and it's basically kind of like dealing with, do you understand the boundaries that you need to put around yourself? And do you understand the boundaries that are on other people and that they need to put that they may not know? And it has helped me to understand that you just don't bunch into someone's life and start acting like it's your life.
Right.
You need to seek for permission. You need to do it in a manner that honors people.
Do you remember the author of Boundaries?
The author of Boundaries is Dr. Townsend. There's What's Wrong with Management and How to Get It Right. Because I think management, we create a lot of crises sometimes.
Right.
And sometimes we create quite a disconnect, and that's by Tony Manning, who's one of the great leadership. Yeah. Health-wise, there's eating according to your blood group.
All right.
I actually didn't know that I can't just wake up and eat everything. There are certain things that are good for me according to my blood type. There are certain things that are not. And when I actually started implementing that, oh, okay, when I eat beef, I can't really add dairy products on top. This is what they do to the system. It changed my health. I became stronger, I became fresher all the time.
You look good.
Yeah. And of course, the Bible is daily. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Justin, thank you so much for the insights that you've shared on an industry that is not very easy to understand. But I think you've broken it down into digestible morsels. So thank you so much for that. We wish you and Homelux all the best. I mean, 20 years in business is not a joke. We're sure there's more good stuff awaiting you as you have done your halfway through life and handing over to your boys and the people that work with you. So we wish you all the very best. Thank you, Justin, for making the time. Allow me to turn to our viewers who are in Zimbabwe, on the continent, and all over the diaspora who watch this show every week. To thank you for making this show the success that it has become over the past 18 or so months. To ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, we invite you to press this red button here and subscribe. And then you get a notification every Monday morning at 7 a.m. when we have these quality shows dropping. Thank you for watching. And remember, we also now have podcasts. Scroll down this video and you will find a link that takes you to our podcast. We enjoy your comments. We enjoy the suggestions that you make as to who we should talk to next. Keep them coming. But until next time, cheers to you all.